Good afternoon. We're here on Poet to Poet, Writer to Writer, and I'm with my guest, Kate Chadbourne. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you very
nice of you to be here.
I'm delighted to be with you.
And I hope some of her fans out there are watching her on live stream here at Somerville Community Access TV. Kate Chadbourne is a singer, storyteller, and poet whose performances combine traditional tales with music for voice, harp, flutes, and piano. She holds a Ph.D. in Celtic Languages and Literatures from Harvard, where she teaches courses in Irish language and folklore. But her heart is the understanding of Irish folk tradition that comes from encounters with singers, storytellers, and the great talkers in Ireland. She's been a tradition bearer in the Revels Salon series and the Gaelic Roots Concert Series at Boston College. Her music was recently featured on NPR's Cartalk and All Songs Considered. And songs from her latest CD, The Irishy Girl, are played on Irish radio programs throughout the country. The Harp-Boat, a collection of poems about her father, a Maine lobsterman, won the Kulupi Prize 2007 Sense of Place Chapbook contest and was published in 2008. I'm glad to have you here, and we've read together over the years. I've had you in my series and reviewed your books, and so you're multi-talented, performer. So, and I think I met you years and years ago at the Maine,
in Ocean Park.
Yeah, the State of Maine
Writers Conference,
right?
Yeah,
It's a long time ago. That was a long time ago. Well, it was about 14 years ago, I think.
Probably.
Yeah. Now you have a Ph.D. and you're very accomplished in scholarship, etc. You have a Ph.D. in Celtic languages and you teach courses at Harvard for years. But you say your real understanding of the culture actually comes from talking to the people, from the common guy, the guy at the bar, or the wherever. So tell me a bit about that. I mean, your formal education and your informal education.
Yeah, that's a great question. The way that they weave together.
Yeah.
I feel like you need them both.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to do your book learning, but then you get out, and I always remember like walking in the hills of Wicklow, and I met this little man.
Where's that in Ireland? In what part of Ireland?
It's in the east part of Ireland, sort of south of Dublin.
Okay.
And was walking there, and I met this man, and I was fresh out of doing folklore research at the Folklore Archive in Dublin, so it was all in my mind. And he was this nice little man, and I said, "What do you do for fun in the evenings?" And he said, "Oh, we talk, or we play cards, or we fight." And I had been actually looking at things about ritualized conflict, and there it was. And it was just, I don't know, the pinging off of your scholarly life and what people are actually telling you and what they're saying about their lives, and the cadence and the music and the life in those conversations. The food.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's the whole texture of life.
Absolutely, and that's where it comes together.
Because if you were just studying this, then you'd be very clinical, wouldn't you?
You could be.
I mean, if you were just studying the texts and things like that, rather than immersing yourself in the culture.
Absolutely. So for me, I am totally mad about the music and poetry and storytelling, and I want to hear it in life. I love what I study, and I love the lives that I feel on the page. And one thing I always say is that folklore scholarship in the Irish language is warmer and more intimate than it is in English. But when you are sitting there in the pub in Donegal and you're listening to, the fiddler play a slow air, and you're observing the etiquette of the moment, it's very different, and everything comes together.
Maybe it's my imagination, but you almost have like this Irish lilt to your voice.
I can't tell you how many people have said that. I think it's only because of listening and teaching. I guess I've been teaching Irish now for something like 14, 15 years.
Yeah.
So it kind of gets in there.
Yeah.
But really, if I were, if you talk to my big brother, if my big brother Dan were sitting in here, you would talk to a real Mainer. I'm from Maine.
And I imagine you were steeped in the Irish tradition there back.
No, not really. I mean, my mother's side of the family is Irish, but no, it was one of those things where, like a lot of families, they want to be American, they're here. So
it's the same with being Jewish. My father wanted to divorce himself from
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Here we are.
And then our generation comes back to being, embracing the roots again.
Absolutely.
Right. Because we want to rebel.
Of course.
Right.
Well, and also you can sense there's juicy stuff under the surface, and you want to get at it.
Right.
And for me, it was the language first that was the siren call of like, what is that? I need to get close to that.
Right, exactly.
And it still is.
And the oral traditions,
I
used to hear from my family about coming over from Russia and the Lower East Side, so it's also, and the Yiddishisms and all that stuff. So it's just like in Irish, it's a much more musical language than English is. It's a lyrical language, and Yiddish is too. And so I could see where you would be very attracted.
And in some ways, I think I'm interested in that actually, that there is a bit of a tie or a parallel between Yiddish and Irish.
Not really.
As well, both
Well, Mayor Briscoe of Dublin, right?
Well, absolutely.
Right, he's Jewish.
Yeah. But I think languages that are slightly marginal, that have had to creep through. I read a book by Aaron Lansky on saving Yiddish literature. He actually has the Yiddish Literature Center in Amherst. And this was
I was out there. Great
given
place.
to me by an Irish language scholar who said, read this because there's a real bridge here, really in the cases of languages that are imperiled in some, and I hate to say that about Irish, but, languages that need help, we'll say.
Can I ask you a question? Why do we call them the Celtics? Why don't we call them the Celtics?
Pure badness. Whoever came up with the Celtics was purely bad.
Okay. But it really is the Celtics.
It should be the Celtics. We don't have a soft C in Irish or in Celtic actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you wrote a collection of poetry called the Harp-Boat about your lobsterman father, and did your father in any way, the sea is inherently romantic and poetic. I think there's a great deal of poetry. That's why I think we're all driven to the sea, because that's the whole, where we came from, the birth, the amniotic, whatever, you can get all kinds of Freudian things. So I know whenever I'm there, I'm sort of transfixed and feel much calmer, and you can see a horizon and whatever. But did your father instill you with a love of poetry in any, did he in his own way?
He would have said, he's dead now for several years, he would have said he was the furthest thing from a poet going, and yet there were rhythms in his speech, even in his swearing, that I think were very poetic. Just the way that he could complain, there was poetry in that. But really, I think what I got from him was a sense of season and time and being in step with something in a way that most people...
Well, he was in step with nature. Then, let's say my father was an advertising man with Madison Avenue, and maybe I got something from him. But it'd be very different. Maybe your father was with nature. He was. Yeah.
He was. Our lives, even our economic life, really flowed in sync with what was happening with fishing. So the summers, my parents would go out to supper. The winters, never going out to supper, and my father rising early to go out fishing. And, there was a season for mending traps, and there's a season for mending the boat, and a season for putting the boat back in, and a season for making pretty good money fishing, and then a season for not having a lot of money. And there was a sense of a round of the year. And I think that also led me to my interest in the season, the sort of the round year in Ireland. So I don't know about you, but I feel like you get to this point in your life and then you see that a lot is woven together.
Yeah, and I think we all, our poetry comes from our life experience in any case, from whatever it is.
Definitely.
Now, you play the harp, right?
I do.
Yeah, and you play it very well. I've heard you perform.
Well, thank you.
Very impressive. And first of all, how did you come with the harp?
I wasn't a harper until, I guess now, something like 10 or 11 years ago. My whole life I was a piano player, still am, passionate about the piano, since I was 5. But when I was on a postdoc in Ireland in 2002 to 2003, a friend of mine looked at me and said, "You look like a harper." And I said, "Oh, no, not me. I'm a piano player and singer." But the next year, when I was back in the United States, my husband at the time we had bought him a harp because it was his dream to play the harp, and I kept my paws off of it because I can be very greedy about musical instruments that are in my vicinity, but no, not going to touch it. But the result was that it was never, ever played. It wasn't in him to play it. So that year when I came back from Ireland, I was going to play music in an assisted living home, and I said, would you mind if I just borrow the harp for today to make some chords? And that was the beginning, and I fell head over heels with the harp. And the marriage is no longer, but I have the harp. So.
Yeah. Well, let's not harp on the marriage. I hope it didn't come between you.
No. He's a good guy.
He is a good guy. So how do you integrate your music into your poetry?
More and more all the time, actually. I mean, once in a while, sometimes these days, as I tell a story, maybe one from Irish tradition, I actually harp at the same time. And I am totally crazy about putting poems to music, not so much my own, but other people's. So,
in fact, we discussed possibly putting some poems of mine, if you like them.
I would love to see them.
I know you've flattered me very much on some poems I've written, and so hopefully I have a shot.
No, it's not flattery.
All right.
It's
well,
not flattery.
I mean, flattery doesn't have to be false.
Right. Well, true enough. Okay.
I don't mind being flattered. Believe me.
Who does? Yeah. God, poets, we eat flattery for breakfast, right?
Because we don't get any money.
No, right. So we got to make do on flattery.
Right.
No, but I'd love to try that. But I've been putting poems to music. I've done a stint of a lot of poets from the 1920s, and it's just because the poems themselves speak to me. Like I did recently, Moonlit Apples by John Drinkwater, this poem. At the top of the house, the apples are laid in rows, and the skylight lets the moonlight in, and those apples are deep-sea apples of green.
Wow.
It's a beautiful poem, and I couldn't...
And you put that to music?
I did.
Yeah.
I just get seized with the desire. I fall in love with the poem, and then I find I'll be literally doing the dishes at the sink and hearing it in my head. So I've loved to do, poems by poets that are well known, but now I've done some poems by other people. One of them was a 7-year-old boy who made this poem, which I'll say to you. This was his first poem ever. It says, "Oh, I'll see you in hell." Isn't that the best line ever? 7 years old.
7 years old, yeah.
"Oh, I'll see you in hell. Oh, I'll see you in heaven. I'll see you back on earth again. For we all go through that cycle, the great life cycle, where the rainbows grow, where the waterfalls rise, where the river has a very nice flow, and don't destroy it, for there is very much life here, the living and the dead, the dying and the born." That's his poem.
Wow. And
by sheer good luck, I met his mother the day that he composed that poem, and we met each other, and she said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I'm a poet, and blah, blah, and I love putting poems to music." And she said, "Amazing, because my son said as he went on the bus, I wish someone would sing my poem that morning." So I put that to music, and Alex, his name is Alex, has come to hear it performed and waved regally to all the listeners, and has been a bit of a star. So
wow.
Anyway, I just love the process. I feel like I fall in love with the poems even more. I see their beauties from the inside out.
Wonderful. And songwriting is a bit like poem writing, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
it is. I think you're trying to access the same bedrock of truth in a way. And feeling.
Absolutely.
And feeling.
Yeah, you're trying to emote. Now, you've started this new Bardic Academy, and it's a new website. What's the URL for that?
Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
It's www.bardicacademy, so Bardic, B-A-R-D-I-C, academy.com.
Okay, so go to that website.
Yes,
what will they
please.
find when they go to that website?
They will find resources for writers and for musicians.
Okay.
So there's sort of two angles right now. One of them is giving lessons to what I call bards. So people like me who do more than one thing. Say you'll have a poet or a harper, say, who also wants to sing. Or I have a mother and daughter who come every Tuesday, and they like to do art projects, and they'll do...
Come where?
To my house.
Okay.
Yep. So these are lessons that I offer at my house or by Skype.
And then where's your house? And, I don't know if you want to say
That's
that.
all right. It's in Lunenburg, Massachusetts.
Okay. So you teach privately and you connect people also.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, if someone out there in the audience wanted to what would you teach?
So they could come for singing, harping, piano playing, poetry, storytelling, various kinds of art. I do teach someone right now singing in the Irish language itself. So a whole lot of things, really.
And they can contact you. All the contact information is at this website, which is again?
www.bardicacademy.com.
Yeah, I recommend it highly. She's a very gifted teacher.
Thank you.
Now, you were also telling me about how folks can commission songs from you. You told me you wrote one about scabies. Someone said that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's something I came up with called Wellwishing Songs. And it grew out of my own desire to make my music useful in some way.
Yeah.
So one night I was at the piano and I had been listening to horrible news reports about children in Africa, and I just began to play and was hoping that the music, even it sounds a bit mad, but that it would send something to them. And that led me to this thought that I could actually do this for people who would request these songs. So people can go, actually, there's a website which is www.wellwishingsongs.com. And these are all instrumental. So it's improvisation. I sit down at the piano. I have a letter usually from the person, and it might say, my child is sick, or it could be something good. My wife and I have been married for 25 years. I had one of those recently. It's all over the map, human experience. And I sit down and I hold that in my mind, and usually I'm playing the piano, and I just let it rip and see what happens.
Okay.
A few of them have words, but mostly they're instrumental, improvised. And then I just send it to the person with a letter.
Oh, wonderful.
So anybody's welcome. And so far I've made more than 40 of those songs over the last year.
Are your rates reasonable?
It's free.
Oh, well, you got to get more of a business sense about you,
Well, this is my heart. I want to give something. Music is the best joy in my life.
Yeah.
And I just want to share it. So.
Well, you're an unusual woman, Miss Chadbourne.
Oh, thank you.
Now, I'm reading your poems, and you're very a fine nature poet. And it seems what the message I get from a lot of them is you're not trying to manipulate, like we all try to manipulate nature. Gardens are a manipulation of nature. We manipulated nature now that we have a global warming crisis. But you learn from it. You sort of sit back and just sort of learn.
That's
like
so
as a teacher.
interesting.
Yeah. Maybe you could just comment on that, and then we can get into reading some of it.
Well, I love that you noticed that. I have a great trust in nature of all kinds, human nature even, I must say. Our bodies, absolutely, but also the sanctity of this world, the holiness and the integrity of this world. Mm-hmm. So it seems to me one of the great honors of life is witnessing that integrity in each other and in the world.
Wonderful.
So,
well
gosh,
stated.
Thank you for noticing that in my work. I'm really delighted.
The poems, just from the poems you sent me, but anyway, why don't you lay some poems on us? You have about 10 minutes.
I would love to.
And for the sake of the tape, we'll let you, if you're in the middle of one and we go off the air, we'll let you read for the sake of the tape. But
okay.
All right. We're community TV. I'm not that polished of a guy, but...
Well, I would love to. Thank you so much. Let's start with folklore. This is a poem that actually comes out of Irish folklore. It's called The Ulster Woman. And in the folklore of the West, in Connacht, in Ireland, there is a folk belief that there's a magic woman, and she comes from the north of Ireland, and she knows everything that you need to know. Now, as it happens, if you happened to be in Ulster, there is the same belief about a Connacht woman. Essentially, it's a woman who travels and who knows about the essential things of life.
Okay.
So this is called the Ulster Woman. The Ulster Woman came on a secret horse, which grazed invisible oats and left no print. She wrapped her head up like a parcel, but her chest and feet were bare as udders. At the wallop of crisis, or the screech of fierce need, she assembled on the door jamb, herself and her kishan of herbs, herself and her travellers knowing, herself and the ghosts who taught her the butter and the baby and the wool. And a kishan is just a basket. Mm-hmm. So that idea that this woman comes with everything you need to get yourself back on track. Okay. That's the Ulster Woman. Okay. And I'll read you one more. So this is, I don't think I even included this. This is from a little book called Brigit's Woven World, which is my most...
This is your most recent?
My most recent book. And these are, it's called, And Other Poems of Ireland. Okay. So these are Irish poems. And this one is called Cables, and it's about Irish knitting.
Irish knitting.
And my mother is a great knitter. She'd blush to hear that, but she is. And I learned from her that knitters actually sort of encode things into the ganzis, into the sweaters that they knit. So this poem comes from that. Cables. From the wool card in the kitchen, they ravel him out to sea in a jumper of bluest black, colour of mussel shells and rain squalls. This is sharing. All humble roads pull both ways, taut intersections of morning's outspin and evening's wind in. The knitters treat the wool with oil to slap off Spray's ice hands. They insist on an even trade. The light hours he frays in the curragh, nodding air to sea, sea to air, nets and fish. At supper time, he lopes uphill to the young woman, her chowder, a child, a talk under the quilt. She is learning to knit his family name without letters. Crossed ropes, honeycombs, smoke phantoms on stone walls, a tree on each sleeve. His mother sits in the cane chair and counts out stitches with her every afternoon until a coarse skin appears in the shape of her man, practically waterproof and unmistakably his. She invokes the yarn against cold, storm, and anonymous drowning. Even after years, a body comes home, drifts into the bay with a face as featureless as kelp. They drag him off the beach and can still discover his name in the salty tangle. He is Nora's man, they say, and she claims him, pointing to the sign for seabirds, 3 on each shoulder. They bury him under a stone in the churchyard. At the hearth, she was taught of the intricate and endless pattern, the women's diligent needles tying strand to strand, and the sea, remorselessly tugging the loose end of the skein.
Nice.
And there's our sea again. Well, let's see. I brought one thinking about poetry, as we are poets, and this is called My Muses. And I just wanted to throw out, if anybody is watching, this is something you could try, is to think about who are your muses.
Oh, okay.
So this is a series, I don't know, something like 10.
Who or what?
Who or what are your muses? Right. And most of mine are whats.
Oh, okay.
So
inanimate objects?
Or even ideas.
Yeah.
And what they do for you. But I think everybody has them, because I do believe everybody has their genius of whatever kind. And genius just means really the spirit of the place. So it's not...
Yeah, oh, yeah. Everyone has a genius. There was this British woman I know, and she said, "That's brilliant." Everything she would say, "That's brilliant." I always felt good about that. But I think we all have our moments of brilliance, you know.
Yes, I do too.
Yeah,
I do too. And one of the great pleasures of life is witnessing them in each other. Mm-hmm. And I love that she says, and they say that all over Ireland, "That's brilliant." Yeah,
so that's a good sign. That's a good thing to say.
It is a good thing to say.
Yeah.
Just that affirmation. Who doesn't love that?
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe people, if they want to, any poets, and everybody's a poet too, could try to make their muses poem. So this is called My Muses. Muse of music heard in dreams, you are a linen shadow, disappearing through the door. Muse of kissing, you first adore the birds, the rain, and the moon. Muse of turning the corner, you tug the wheel toward the freshest air. Muse of lucky breaks, you blow gold dust on my fingers, words, eyes. Muse of perfectly toasted toast, you wait at midnight in your furry slippers. And that, of course, is toast at midnight is one of life's great pleasures.
I like a shot of whiskey, but I mean, you know.
You can have toast and whiskey, that'll do. Muse of fox sightings at dusk, you lure me with the ache of pine shadow. Muse of remembering just in time, you tickle the knowing until it triggers the known. Muse of picnics, you cannot resist a pink cupcake. Muse of dictionary pleasure, you whiffle the pages, raising the scent of letters. Muse of keys and strings, you made me a sailor on beautiful ships. Muse of glad for no reason, you are in league with cardinals and the wind.
Nice.
Those are some of my joys.
Okay, still have 5 minutes. So.
All right, well, I read forever.
Yeah, I know. I just have to close some time.
This book that you mentioned, the Harp-Boat,
That won a big award, didn't it?
Well, an award anyway. Thank you for saying that. I mean, it's as you know, for poets to win any money at all is pretty awesome.
Right, yeah.
So I'm very happy about that. And winning that...
You know, it's a friend of mine won a $5,000 award in Skokestown, Ireland. Stokestown Award.
Wow, that is a big award.
That is. He won $5,000.
Wowza.
Have you ever heard of that award?
I have heard of that award.
Yeah.
Wow.
Lawrence Kessenich.
Well done, Lawrence.
Yeah.
Awesome. This won $1,000, which was great. And it's how I got my big harp.
Okay.
So thank you, poetry.
There you go.
So this is a poem called My Father's Feet. So my father was a lobsterman, and at the end of his days, he was in the hospital, and he'd always been, he'd always had trouble with his feet. He'd had corns and things, and one of the loveliest things about that time was that I started to really take care of his feet. It was a kind of intimacy between us that I was working on the corns, and I was putting Vicks Vapor Rub on the feet. It's funny now. At the time, it was really important because it was a way of being close. So that's where this poem comes from. My father's feet were wide, had corns and a strange nail on each small toe. Not really a nail at all, more a curl of nail stuff. Looked best in suede shoes, worn rarely nights out with Mama, the odd ceremony. Went most days in sneakers reeking with bait juice, stained and ripped, but glad to go along, like his partners. Spent wet days in waders sloshing over the deck, rain dry and sea dry, but sweating in rubber. Tired easily, and liked the lazy boys built-in hassock, dry socks, MASH reruns, not moving all night. Swelled and cracked in the hospital, begged to climb into the truck or stand at the wheel. Let me rub cream into the corns and cut the stony nails, work on the fungus with Vicks, knead the bones. That's where I met them up close first. That's where they spoke candidly at last. Such dear feet they were.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Poet to poet, writer to writer.
Oh, my delight. Thank you so much for having me.